So everybody, obviously the world is operating a little bit differently as the time we record this. And a lot of people are at home. A lot of people are venturing out only when they need to. A lot of people now have an opportunity to be creative or think about their life in a different way, either by, because they have to, or, you have an opportunity now to do it. So what Josh and I are talking about today is probably reimagining the kind of work that you do. I think the first topic we'll talk about is, Josh, asynchronous, synchronous work.
Yeah, it's a good one.
Let's do that. Think on this as we launch out onto the loop and discuss reimagining your work today on Curiosity Continuum. Hey everybody, this is Brian.
And this is Josh.
Thank you for joining us today on Curiosity Continuum. For those of you tuning in for the first time, Curiosity Continuum is a podcast and movement started by two lifelong friends who want to spark your curiosity, help you integrate information, and enhance your everyday contextual awareness in a constantly changing world. We share conversations with you that explore, examine, and reframe common practical topics.
If you want to receive updates when new content is available, and we are hoping that you do, please be sure to hit subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you can receive notifications when there's something new to listen to. We appreciate you, our listeners, for engaging with us and sharing your own curiosities with your friends and with us as we explore topics together.
And you can always find us on curiositycontinuum.com and social media. Forward to hearing from you soon. We just jump right into it. As the world now, as other nations around the world are looking at how we address COVID-19, which is a very now topic. We're living in very strange history days right now, don't you think, Josh?
Yeah, oh yeah, definitely. I mean, we've lived through strange history days, and now we're living through some more, so.
Yep.
When you thought it couldn't get any stranger, and here it goes.
And now for something completely different. Who knew,
Exactly.
Who knew Monty Python would be prophetic in their their content how many years ago? Let's talk about this, because depending on what situations you find yourself in right now, people are looking at it from their perspective, like
Right.
how they're inconvenienced, or they can't do this, or they can't, making it very like me-centered. Really, the goal here, like what we always try to do on the podcast, is make it so you can see it from somebody else's perspective.
Exactly. And I mean, we live in a very me-centered society. You want your food, you want it now. You want, you want to go to the store, you want to get it now. You want to order on Amazon, and you want it later that day,
Yeah.
And it's just not happening right now. And I think it starts bringing into perspective some of what is actually important.
It does. Put yourself in somebody else's shoes right now. Now, look, I'll be honest, as this thing began to ramp up, I was really considering, what are the ramifications of it for my family? Because
Right.
everybody's generally healthy in my family. And, my stepdad has some limited lung capacity. So he's actually was one of the first ones in my family to say, like, hey, that I'm have a closer relationship with, to say, hey, he's going to start socially distancing. And I'm like, that brings into perspective, because he's in his 70s and he has the type of health conditions that would actually be not, beneficial to going out and just doing what he's always done.
Right. I think everyone thinks about like that. The first time whenever you hear something, it is about how does this affect you? And if it doesn't affect your immediate circle, like your immediate family or your immediate people you have contact with every day, I think sometimes we as a society and even as people just kind of put it out of our mind until you do hear something like Brian, for example, because his father-in-law, or not a father-in-law, I'm sorry, stepdad. But for example, my wife, she has severe asthma. So, yeah, I mean, we're in the same kind of boat. We're always kind of on guard during flu season anyway. So now we're just taking it another step further, pretty much.
I've seen a lot of comments also where, oh, you're just being fearful if you're being prudent. And that's not the case. You can be prudent, and it doesn't mean that you are all of a sudden like operating out of a place of fear. It means that you're being circumspect and considerate about others around you, right? And
Yeah.
when you see this also too, and what's been talking about now is like what type of bailout are the big companies going to get, and that becomes a very political conversation also. But let's take it to the small business owner. I'm a small business owner myself. And, when you can't go and invoice or go do something, and you kind of are required to be in the room to work through like things like that, not everything can be done on Zoom. Not everything can be done like remotely. And that's where we're seeing the ramifications of living in an analog world, even though there's many digital mechanisms. I think people are going to be impacted unevenly by this whole thing.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I think, Stu, like you're seeing the impact of the analog thing on the digital world, or how the digital world is going to adapt. And that's kind of the thing I think you got to look at. It's going to be eye-opening, and it is eye-opening to people, how much of our world we still want to interact with one-on-one or being in the room with somebody, even though we can use technology. Like we have Brian and I have a close friend who like thrives on going out with his friends and, going to work out and all that stuff. And now he can't. And so you're finding really quickly that we really enjoy those things in life.
Yeah. And it's a necessary thing. What this is doing is putting the real world realities into something that's colliding with the digital world, like where we have this idea that everything is just easily accessible just because it is. And it's not true. There's been a lot of conveniences that being in the Western world we're afforded. But again, it's not an even curve. I have friends who are restaurant owners, and it's a big hit for them right now. I mean, so it's a big deal. I mean, this is a lot of revenue that comes on, and not just for the business, but then also for the people that they employ. They employ a whole lot of people. These are folks that aren't like, hey, I got my $250,000 just stashed away in the bank right now, or like my house is paid for.
Right.
These are folks that are paying rent. These are folks that are, putting their children through school the best they can.
They're living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah. Now, you could easily come back and say, well, why don't people save? The right answer to save, yes, but it's very tone deaf to actually the logistical needs of a family in a given day, week, month.
Right. And I mean, just like today, Brian.
That's
and
true.
So there's a lot of people that are going to be struggling. And I know, and it is that conversation like, well, why don't they save? And obviously that is the right answer, the right question to ask, but maybe not right now, because it doesn't take away from the reality of in 3 to 4 weeks from now. Let's say this whole thing blows over in 3 to 4 weeks or 6 weeks. Well, these people still haven't paid rent for a month.
Yeah.
Things start happening when you stop paying on stuff.
Yep. And if
it starts triggering.
If you're renting, like I am currently right now, and so my particular situation, I'm very fortunate to live on a piece of property where it's been part of a family for a long time, and so I could easily walk over if I needed to and probably work out something, just because like I know that the entire place is paid for as far as the grand everything. To that extent. And so I have a little bit more flexibility. But for some landlords and people who have rental properties, like they have a note to pay and the bank still needs the payment versus. So there's a lot of like domino effects that happen along the way when people have to start making decisions. Do I feed my family or do I pay my rent? I mean, those are things that it has a chain reaction effect all the way down the line.
Right. And these are like real problems that, people are going to be dealing with over the next few weeks or months really to come, because we don't really know the full fallout of all this yet. So I think what Brian and I wanted to touch back on today, I was just giving you guys a little context into what we're talking about. And so some of the jobs which you can do at home, or you can, like a IT job, for example, or all you need is a command line and an internet connection,
and you're good.
and you can do your job. And so I think Brian and I wanted to talk a little bit about like asynchronous and synchronous work, and how that I think we feel how that's kind of being integrated into the economy at kind of like a fast pace because of necessity.
We're at an excellent spot where if you've done things the way you've always done them and expected them to work the way they've always worked, we are now living in a very prime time where you're realizing this crap doesn't work the same way that it used to. And that's a great opportunity also to say, how can I make this work? That means that you're going to lean back into the active part of your brain to problem solve and to be creative and think of alternate ways to do your business, right? If you serve customers, how to serve your customers. For a lot of creative folks, I have musician friends that they're like, you know what, maybe I can go create in the studio for something. They're taking the moment right now to pivot and to do something meaningful and useful for themselves and for their families and for their businesses. Let's talk about the synchronous work, Josh. So obviously there are some things that you have to do in real time. If you're a surgeon working on somebody in the operating room, the nurse can't come 3 hours later and like finish their task. It doesn't work that way. There's a clear present thing to do.
And yeah, I mean, that's another interesting conversation, because with the advent of like distance medicine and even surgery now through robots, where a surgeon doesn't have to be in the same room. So it's an interesting conversation to have, definitely. But I think we're trying to touch base more with anything in a lot of technology fields. If you're working and you don't have, you want to be working synchronously with your people, you kind of have to be in the same room or at least in the same environment, right, Bri?
Yeah, or at least be on the clock at the same time. Say, "Hey, I'm going to talk to you about X,
Right.
Y, Z." So the best way for people, whether or not you're in a job that does this, is basically a meeting. If you're going to meet with somebody,
You
that's
got to be there with. You got to be in the meeting.
that's right.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times people do a lot of schedule coordination to do. Now, we've all seen the funny memes probably go around like, this was a 5-hour meeting that could have been like a 2-minute email. And that's true in some cases. There's still things to be said about gathering together, but let's talk about the ways you asynchronously communicate, because we all communicate differently. Some people are very comfortable talking in real time and just talking off the top of their head. Other people want to sit and think about what they want to say, and they're very thoughtful when they say it. We also live in the age now where you could easily, like if Josh wanted to send me an audio message, I think that'd be a great way to communicate. We do that from time to time. Or if I wanted to send a message back and forth, as long as it's captured somewhere, there's flexibility for people to communicate that still gets the point across and lets everything move forward.
Yeah, and I mean, like asynchronous messaging. Think about a text message, an email. Those are all asynchronous. You create the message, send it to somebody, and they don't have to respond right away. They could let that text message or email sit there for a week or two. Even if you click a little urgent thing, that they can let it sit there. And I mean, I know that a lot of people for their works, they see, for how they work, they see that. But it is really asynchronous work. It's not work that has to be performed at the same time.
And that's where I think we've made value judgments about things in our life, personal or professional, to say like, well, this has to happen at the same time. It's like, well, what if it didn't have to? What if this
Right.
was okay? If it wasn't that? But what it's going to require you to do is probably make everything that what you've made a golden goose in your life in some way and decided not to disrupt it, and say it's time to touch it and see what we can do to actually make this better or make it different. The realities are too, like when we look at where we are today, it's not going to go back to quote normal overnight. There's going to be ramifications that will probably have to be worked out over the course of months to be able to figure out what this thing is. And so the question is, and the challenge is, are you brave enough to look at things that you've held as this is the ways that I want to do my life, and rather than scrambling to try to get back to normal, have you actually thought of the alternate ways of how you can live a thriving, wonderful, professional, personal experience in a different format?
Right. And instead of that craving of the quote unquote normalcy, I would like really encourage people to say like, what is normal?
Yeah.
Like what is that? Is that even something worth talking about anymore? I don't think it is really. I mean, I think normal for one person can be totally not normal for another person, and that's okay.
I think we've seen that even, Josh. My children now are out of school until further notice, just like many. And I
Right.
know the school's trying to put together a plan to like have people, distance education or stuff like that. Now we homeschooled for a lot of years, so we're familiar more with kind of the cadence of what that is. There's just such
Right.
unfamiliarity with those things that people have to go, okay, there's enough disruption now to make them try to think. What happens probably is that some people are just clamping down so they can just bear through it to get back to whatever they had.
What they had. I mean, think about if something like this happened when we were kids. We wouldn't have been able to do the distance learning thing.
No way.
Your teacher would have had to call you up and say, "Well, do you have, do this lesson plan, this that?" No, it wouldn't work.
No. Mm-mm.
It just doesn't work. And you might not have the books. Now I'm floored when I see how kids learn today, where they have their books on their iPads and it's all electronic, and they can be updated in real time. The teacher can point things out. They can do lesson plans online. They can, it's all like very interesting to me because I did not learn that way.
Right.
And to me, it was almost like they flipped a switch and it all of a sudden happened, even though I know it didn't happen that way. It's just that I don't have children of my own, so I didn't see the evolution of it.
And it's come differently over time. I mean, like there's been a lot of other homeschool things. I've done like video courses and learning and stuff like that, and you've kind of watched that. There's some homeschool curriculum is all videos. It wasn't actually like a classroom. It was like a recording of a classroom, which got sent out.
Right.
So here's interesting too. Like we've talked about people who are really good at just executing something, and then there are those who actually in a situation you want them because they have wherewithal to kind of problem solve on the spot. And we're entering a phase right now where you're actually looking to the people who aren't necessarily the deep specialists, but people who actually think broadly and are willing to like throw away something that is not as important as it needs to be and reconfigure the ship however they need to.
Right, right. Somebody that can, reconfigure the ship while it's in midair, because that's kind of what we need right now, is that kind of jack of all trades person who can look at something, look at the end goal, and even though the middle is different, let's figure out how we get there.
Yep.
And that's what we're doing right now. I mean, that's what the education system is doing. There's kids are sitting at home, and some of them, they're looking at the very real possibility they're not going to go back this year. So how do they not lose a year of education?
It's the understanding that you learn wherever. When Josh and
learning is not a place so much.
Right. Get everybody caught up back in time. So we built our first spud gun. Josh and myself and our friends Will and Eric, and we took time after our senior year to put this thing together. And we have some video footage of it somewhere, which we may share at some future date if we can get our hands on it. But we, that was done in that age, and so when my son last year had to come up with his science fair project, he's like, hey, would you like to recreate something like this but make it even better than what we did? He learned so much in that process. He's learned he actually likes how things work, how they actually could work. What if I tore this apart? The thing he's realizing also too is that inventions and innovations don't have to be complicated, because you can take all the STEM classes you want, which is now STEAM, which they're trying to fold art in, that's another topic for just a moment, I guess. It's like, well, this has to be really complicated. It's like, no, it doesn't. It actually doesn't have to be complicated.
And I think one of my favorite stories about that is the pencil and the eraser. That there was a time when pencils were just pencils and erasers were just erasers. And somebody said, you know what, I'm going to put the eraser on the pencil.
Yep.
That is a super simple idea.
Yeah.
But a revolutionary train of thought. Because he took two things that were familiar that person did not create either, and just say, well, put it together.
I have some favorite games on my phone, and they're the alchemy games where it's like, here's 4 elements, and however you put it together, now you can create 1,000 different things. Some of it was like people had to say, oh, you put air plus water, that's steam. Those are really fun because you have a finite set of things, but look at all the different things you can do with it. It's a fun way to kind of explore. That's what games did when we spent time together. It wasn't that we knew where we were going in the game fully in the middle, but when the problems presented, it was really good. And look, I learned everything I learned from gaming. I learned from Josh LeGroux, which is 98% true because he brought me down the rabbit hole to be able to do that stuff. But seriously, I loved playing with Josh on those games because we could solve problems together.
Right.
There's a specific one. There's a game called King's Quest VI that came out, and Josh had the awesome computer where it was all set up. He had in his dad's office, we could go and play the computer games. And I still remember the smell of the room and the sound of the discs booting up and everything. And, it's ingrained.
The musty man smell of sweat. Yeah.
And an old house, There was a puzzle that we had to do in the catacombs of that game. And, I came over to Josh's house and he was trying to figure it out. And then we were saying, well, what can we do? And I actually looked in the instruction manual and I found a little passage where it actually told you how to get through. It's like, that's what it is, man. And then we walked through and it solved the problem. But it's the power of being able to work together. That time we were together. But, other times too, it's like, hey, if we could call each other now and say, well, I'm stuck on this part. Could you help me? It's like, oh, yeah, I can do that. And that kind of thing. So, Josh, where do we want to land the plane here on anything?
I think we've landed the plane on several things. So I'm thinking if we just let people kind of stew with this, and this is a little longer than I think we normally go, I think it's a good spot to kind of just say we're think about what we've just talked about
and put some legs to your creativity. So until next time, this is Brian
and this is Josh
for Curiosity Continuum.